They say some cities only whisper when you're alone. Harbor City whispers back even when you're surrounded, when the rain clicks at the window like a metronome for guilt, when neon breathes in and out as if it's the city's last lung. The night she walked in, my office sign stuttered Calder Investigations like it wasn't convinced. The hallway smelled of brass polish and burned coffee, the landlord's idea of luxury. She wore a gray suit pressed enough to fold paper and a veil that let your imagination do the heavy lifting. Gloves black as a priest's joke. "Mr. Calder." "That's the name on the door," I said, waving her to a chair that had seen better clients. She removed the hat, hair like a midnight spotlight, controlled and convincing. "I'm Evelyn Vale. I anchor the late edition at WCRX. A voice big enough to vote. I poured 2 fingers of office bourbon into a clean glass and set it between us. She didn't touch it. "I need you to find something called the Ashdown Ledger," she said. "It can ruin my brother or save him, and I'm not sure which is worse. Most people hire me to keep ruin off the porch. She hired me to pick the lock. She laid out the bones. Thaddeus Ashdown, construction magnate with a taste for leverage, recently took the fast route down from a penthouse balcony. The ledger vanished in the confusion. Entries, payoffs, schedules, initials. Martin Vale, her brother, assistant district attorney with a polished future, possibly noted in the margins, or angling to get noted. Who else is shopping?" I asked. "Rook Caruso, riverfront boss for the De Laurentiis outfit," she said. "And someone inside the DA's office calling himself Mr. Winter. No one sees his face. They just feel the temperature drop." Outside, Neon hiccuped. Inside, Evelyn's calm didn't. "Ashton kept a private office in the Heliotrope building, Suite 1104, she said. "Police recovered 1 set of keys after the fall. I'm told there was a second. And your brother's alibi. Left at 9, home at 2. Said he was at the office." She held my eyes. "I checked, he wasn't. I tucked the names into memory where sharp things live." "Why me?" "Because you don't owe anybody," she said. "Here, that's louder than a recommendation." After she left, the room felt larger, like the walls had stepped back to eavesdrop. I holstered my shoulder piece, shrugged into the coat that always made me look a little more honest than I felt, and headed for Garnet and 6th. The heliotrope is a purple-glassed monolith that looks like a bottle someone forgot to empty. Night clerk, race sheet devotion, coin roll fingers. I signed M. Aubrey in the visitor's book and took the slow elevator that treats every floor like a surprise party. Police seals on 1104 like cheap bracelets. The hallway camera dead, the wiring hung out like a confession. Old tricks still work when nobody's watching. Inside. Stale air, 2 chairs, 1 desk, a plant losing the argument, desk drawers locked. The top came loose with a shim. Receipts, lunch stubs, a matchbook from the Blue Canary. No ledger. But dust tells stories on the bookcase. A clean rectangle where something long had been sleeping until someone carried it out. 2 faint drag marks by the coat tree. And one more thing. Across the hall, 1106 hung open, just a whisper. The room beyond smelled like my cigarettes. Harbor City had just said hello. The smell in 1106 wasn't tobacco. It was Deacon Red's, my brand, rare as innocence since the dock strike. A calling card half burned in the tray. The room wasn't lived in, it was used. A chair facing a peephole into Ashdown's office. A table with ring stains from cups that didn't tip. Somebody watched me search and left a signature that said, "We see you, Cal." I cracked the shade and counted streetlights. A sedan idled 3 buildings down, driver's cap low, passenger head angled toward the door like a patient hound. I took the stairs. Elevators pick sides. The night clerk had migrated to the weather page, promising storms off schedule. I exited by the alley, letting my shoes write a note for anyone trailing, "Try harder." The blue canary glows like a promise in a blue dress. Neon bird perched on a staff, one eye burned out. Inside, smoke committee's pipe, cigarette, a cigar that could vote. The band climbed the stand like they owed it rent. On the mic, Lena Meyer, black satin and a voice that tucked knives into lullabies. She saw me the way stage lights see dust, every fleck in focus. After a set, she met me at the bar. The bartender polished a glass like he was trying to erase it. "City Hall?" she asked, velvet frayed by irony. "No. They don't buy tickets." "Then you're trouble of the interesting kind," tilted smile. "Name, Calder. Sounds like an argument with a radiator." "Ashton," I said, sliding the matchbook from his desk. "He make noise here. Patrons are what we call people who tip. Ashton was what we call a noise," she said. "Sometimes with Rook Caruso, other nights alone and leaving with ideas." "Ever hear Ashton Ledger?" A flicker, almost nothing, almost everything. "Can't say," she lied clean. I showed her a photograph new to both of us. Ashton on the Canary's back staircase with a trench-coated woman. It hadn't been in my pocket when I left the office. Somewhere between heliotrope and here, a careful hand made a delivery. "That staircase is for bass players with broken strings and girls who need quiet," Lena said, voice a touch smaller. "Neither looks like Ashton." "Who's the woman?" "This season, trench coat is the color of everyone," she said. On the far wall, a framed clipping congratulating the Canary on 10 years, signed by a mayor who probably washed the pen afterward. I ordered rye with a hobby, tipped enough to buy one fact. Rook sits booth 3, angled on the back hall to the office door. The knob there had new scratches. Impatience leaves its initials. I left with less than I wanted and more than I liked. Outside, the air had the color of cuffs after a long day. The sedan from the heliotrope eclipsed a corner 2 blocks behind, paused at a red light and ran it, polite but persistent. Not amateurs. Maybe Winter's boys. Maybe Martin's. Could be mine and not know it yet. My place sits 3 flights above a laundromat that bleaches lies on request. Door locked as I left it. Inside, nothing out of place, always the sign of a professional who believes in feng shui. On the kitchen table, an envelope. "Ask the widow," typed onion skin thin. "Harbor City doesn't whisper, it assigns homework." Agnes Pennington lived in Larkspur Heights, a building that wanted to be rich if it could find the right elevator. She wore a robe neat as a closing argument, and eyes that used to hold candles. "You're here about Theodore's copybook," she said before I had a chance to lie. "Everyone comes hunting treasure maps after a drowning. Theodore had balanced mob ledgers like a surgeon balances lives, meticulously with witnesses. 2 months back he crossed the river without a boat and washed up tidy as a receipt near Pier 9. Rumor said he kept duplicates where no one would think to look. If anyone knew where, it was Agnes. She poured tea. The cups matched always means something. People have turned the place over 3 times, she said. Polite, rude, then tidy to hide the rude. She set a sewing tin between us and opened it to thread and buttons and nothing, also the point. They never looked where he actually kept anything. Which was in plain sight. She lifted a book of poems from the shelf and teased a brass key from a pocket glued to the back. Tag 37. He copied to a ledger, she said, then reduced critical pages to microfilm and mailed them post-restant to Union Station. A clerk hands it over if you say his sentence. Which is, "Order isn't goodness. It's just easier to dust," she said, smiling like a teacher who hopes you deserve the next chapter. "The man who came yesterday," she added, "wore a priest's collar and shoes too shiny for contrition. He knew the sentence but not the object." "There's an object?" I asked. "They ask you to identify one," she said. "Theodore liked redundancies. He said numbers behave when they're locked up." We didn't hear the front door open. We heard an error, a careless shoe against the threshold. I moved before my chair finished scraping. First through, a gray suit with the courage to be cheap. Second, a hat that made decisions for its wearer. "Good evening, Mrs. Pennington," Hat said, smooth as folded linen. "We're here to help Mr. Calder make no mistakes." Names got coy. Guns didn't. They wanted the key. I wanted them to request nicely. We compromised. I threw the kettle. Boiling water is the most democratic weapon in a kitchen. Gray suit reeled, yowling profanities that wished they were Latin. Hat reached. I reached faster. His wrist learned humility. Agnes disappeared and reappeared with a cast-iron skillet and all her late husband's collected resentments. The pan treats all skulls the same. "I'm sorry about the mess," she said, trembling more in the shoulders than the voice. "I just cleaned." I pocketed the key and a bruise. "I was never here," I said. "You were never anywhere," she agreed, and I liked her for it. On the landing, a shadow unstitched from the wall. Lena Meyer, amber light making a halo most saints don't earn, held up a portable tape recorder. She pressed play. My voice asked about the ledger. A man's voice answered, calm as ice. "You won't live to read it." "Someone left this at my dressing room," Lena said. "No note. Thanks for the favor." "I brought it for me," she corrected. "I like to know what key the song is in before I sing harmony." Union Station had a locker and a temper. Mr. Winter had a collar he wore like a punchline. The clock moved us all the same. Union Station hums like a hive that learned to lie. I joined the left luggage queue and waited for a clerk who still believed love letters existed. Her badge said June. When it was my turn, I said the sentence. "Order isn't goodness. It's just easier to dust." Her eyes shifted without moving. "There's a second question," she said. "I know." I set down the brass key 37. "The object," she nodded. "A poem behind glass," I said. Agnes had told me without telling me. June let her shoulders unclench and slid me a form. I signed M. Aubrey. The lie fit like a coat I used to wear. She returned with a rain-kissed manila envelope. I didn't open it there. Roofs you don't own are roofs you don't trust. I turned toward the exit and walked into a wall named Martin Vale. His suit wore him like glass wears light. Two plainclothes flanked him, doing community theater for Intimidation 101. "Calder," Martin said, smile tempered for cameras. "You're going to hand me that." "I'm browsing," I said, "Department of Regrets." He adjusted a cuff to show the time he didn't have. "Funny thing. Your name came up in a meeting I wasn't supposed to attend." "We have that in common," I said. Behind him, the station clock lied about the future. I shifted my weight not to run, to make them think I might. The cop on my right braced. The other reached. In the half-second when both men were their worst selves, I shoulder-checked Martin and palmed the envelope to an elderly woman shuffling past with a shopping bag and the four most persuasive words in English. "Hold this a second." Chaos graduated. A porter wedged his cart between Martin and the woman with professional indignation. By the time breaths remembered their jobs, she and the envelope were gone. Martin recovered wrong. "Let's take a ride," he said. They ushered me toward a side exit. Black sedan idling like it knew alleys better than avenues. The ride delivered us not to the DA's office but a parking garage that pretended to be neutral ground. Rook Caruso awaited, suit gray as cigarette ash, eyes taught to blink when it helped. "Afternoon," he said, as if introducing a menu. "You have something that belongs to me, or the city. Depends who's counting." "Maybe to Mr. Winter," I said. Winter stepped from shadow like a curtain lowering. Collar on, hands clean. Paper burns, he said, almost tender. You'll bring me what you took because otherwise Evelyn Vale tells a different story tonight, and names don't survive it. You touch her, I said. The season changes on you. He enjoyed that. Midnight, he said. City Hall time. They left together. A sermon, a smile, and two cops who preferred shortcuts to paperwork. I doubled back to Union Station through a flower market that perfumed second chances. The woman stood at track 6, arguing luggage allowances with a conductor and winning. I apologized, tipped enough to turn a story into a favor, and recovered the envelope. I opened it where secrets nap, the confessional at St. Bridget's. Inside, microfilm, a contact sheet of codes and tape to the back, a photograph of Evelyn Vale shaking hands with Rook Caruso. Truth is a knife. Photographs are the handle. Back at the office, I placed the photograph on the desk like a guest who might steal the silver. Evelyn arrived 10 minutes after I called. The rain called a truce. She clocked the picture, smiled narrower, then let the smile go to ground. When? I asked. Last year, she said. A fundraiser. I shake devils on Thursdays, donors on Fridays. Sometimes they swap. She met my eyes. You think I'm with him. I think Rook thinks you might be. And Winter thinks you're with me. She sat and the chair decided to keep her weight. There's something you didn't ask, she said. Why I really hired you. You said the ledger can clear Martin or cage him. I hired you because I'm not sure I belong to the story I'm reading on air, she said, voice lowering as if someone might report it. Facts turn out to have cousins. If the ledger forces the truth to choose a side, maybe I belong somewhere again, even if it costs me. You talk like a person who wrote the ending early. Sometimes you have to, she said. Otherwise someone writes it for you. I unwrapped the microfilm. She leaned close as if an image might leap out and confess. WCRX has a reader in Archive B, she said. It hums like a drunk wasp, but it works. We can't bring it there, I said. Winter knows your hallways better than you. Then where? A church, I said, or a print shop, places that still believe in paper. Greeley Print, she said. The owner's daughter and I share a piano teacher. He owes me for not reporting his poker nights. We wrapped the reel. Before she left, she touched my sleeve in a way that said thank you without the risk of trust me. 5 minutes later Martin arrived, lip cut, sermon rehearsed. Give me the reel, he said. I bury it, trade for reforms. With who? I said. Rook, the mayor. Legislation is a receipt if the right cash changes hands, he said. You want clean, clean gets rewritten. I can keep the dirt where it belongs. You want me to save your face, I said. Faces are places where lies go to tan. He looked like a man who'd tried sincerity and burned his fingers. When he left, the buzzer sounded on its own. Lena stepped in the window from the fire escape, breath fogging the glass. Greeley's owned on paper by a parish trust. Winter controls, she said. Don't take the reel there. And here, she set a small tape reel on my desk. It's what Rook said last week when he thought the mic was dead. Names, judges, drop points. The door intercom rasped alive with 2 men and a warrant that hadn't learned to read. Open up, one barked. We have questions for Mr. Calder. Tell them I teach answers by appointment, I said, pocketing the tape. Harbor City's clock kept miserable time, but it kept moving. They didn't have a warrant. They had confidence, which gets through more doors than paper. They left when I asked which judge signed the pen they flashed. That bought a 10-minute head start to St. Brigid's, where Father Malley keeps a reader for choir rosters and sins that want archiving. The machine thumped on like it believed in afterlives. Frames blinked into place, columns, initials, dates, balances. In the margins, 3 letters that bend cities, PAC. Here they meant payoff, judges, aldermen, police captains who learned to tell night from negotiations. Then MV, twice. Sums early like a man testing the habit. Evelyn watched in silence. Lena stood guard in the hall. Midway down the reel, WCRX placement, Thursday 9:10 Civic Uplift, dollar figures next to a producer and the deputy mayor's niece. Corruption never moves alone. It brings family. The end frames held drop instructions. Confession, North Vestry sent Florian's code. Tell the lights to rest. Another church. Ashdown believed the only place safe enough to store sins was where sins are advertised. We packed the reel in Lena's tape, thanked Father Malley, and stepped into sunlight that looked like it had a favor. 2 blocks on, a paneled truck rolled a stop sign, side door opening without stopping. 2 men flowed out and invited us in with a third man's pistol. We remained impolite. The 4th man insisted. Inside smelled like burlap and money that had perspired. Rook sat on a crate, auditioning for sainthood. A thug removed the reel from my coat with a tenderness I reserve for evidence and strangers' cats. You move in good neighborhoods, Rook said. Priests, widows, singers, investigators. The city's favorite tarot spread. Forgot prosecutors, I said. He smiled. Do I ever? They dumped us under the L because the new mob is violent with manners. We limped to St. Florian's, a church that pretends to be above it all by standing on a hill. The North Vestry held a small confessional moved for repairs, side panel scuffed, edges proud. A hidden catch yielded, and a steel lockbox blinked back. The code, tell the lights to rest, meant switches. 3 toggles on a molding strip. I killed them and the lock clicked obedience. Inside, a ledger with a blue leather spine, pages edged in regret that would never apologize. I flipped the front. Good books look back. This one accused. CALDER, neat hand, date, sum, a payoff I had never taken. Behind us, the church doors closed, not loud, just sure. Lena's breath touched my shoulder like a metronome. Footsteps approached, soft as a librarian shushing a riot. Mr. Calder, Mr. Winter said, voice walking the nave without raising it. Confession is good for the soul. Yours is nicely pre-filled. I set the ledger on the altar where the choir lamp could read it. You want it, I said, hands visible. Take it in front of the saints and the microphones. Lena had already moved, producing a portable recorder and a wire mic with a cord like a rosary. She snapped it on. The green needle woke. Winter's men posted at door and loft chose angles. The organ loft muzzle tilted left, the universal sign for now. Candlesticks crash like bells finding religion when you rip the altar cloth. The ledger surfed into my arms. Do not shoot in the sacristy, Winter said, calm as weather. The vestry door stuck, a final act from old wood. It gave. We dragged each other through a narrow corridor graded for morals, into a baptistry with a painter's ladder and a high window that chose sides. We climbed, glass surrendered to my shoulder. Stone ledge, courtyard, a parish delivery van with the keys in like a dare. Jump or pray? Lena asked. Both, I said, choosing both. The tires barked as the parish delivery van fishtailed into traffic like it had just learned fear. Lena clutched the recorder against her ribs, breath hard but steady. The ledger, a blue-backed confession with everyone's sins pre-sorted, lay on the passenger seat as if judging my driving. Where? She asked, wiping sweat from her brow. WCRX, I said. Evelyn has reach. And a microphone that can't be bribed. Harbor City's skyline knifed upward through fog, neon bleeding into mist like wounds that hadn't closed. Behind us, a black sedan clipped through traffic 2 lights back, Winter's men, or rooks, or the city's unconscious guilt rallying volunteers. We ditched the van 3 blocks from the station. Inside, the newsroom buzzed in 3 languages and 12 anxieties. Evelyn stood at the booth window, headset crooked, eyes sharper than the scissors on her desk. You look like you crawled out of scripture, she said, seeing the ledger. Winter forged my name inside it, I said. Every payoff, every sin. Clean handwriting, too. Insulting. Evelyn opened the book like it might hiss. This is nuclear. Then light the fuse, I said. She didn't waste time. Archive booth in 20 seconds. If Winter tries to stop this, he'll need to shut down the grid. That's when the lights flickered. Lena cursed softly. They're already here. The generator kicked on, an old beast with arthritis and attitude. Evelyn dragged us into the sound booth. Lena plugged the recorder into the auxiliary input. The needle quivered like a nervous priest. Evelyn leaned into the mic. WCRX breaking bulletin. You're about to hear a recording related to the Ashdown corruption case. Names, amounts, deals. The power snapped. Everything went black. Only the recorder's little green light survived, fierce and trembling. They cut the line, Lena said. No, Evelyn whispered. They cut our line, the city grid still on. She grabbed the recorder and bolted. I followed, ledger under my coat. Security alarms wailed, high, panicked, electronic. The black sedan screeched to the curb outside, doors flying open. Roof, I shouted. We ran up steel stairs that shrieked underfoot. Winter's men were already in the hallway, their guns arguing ethics at high volume. We pushed onto the roof. The air smelled like rain trying to remember where it left its thunder. Any ideas? Lena asked. Just bad ones, I said. One edge of the roof overlooked the old Riverside Print Co., whose skylight hadn't been repaired since Truman. I pointed. That, she said. That. We jumped. Mortals shouldn't fly. We landed anyway, painfully, loudly, somehow intact. Glass shattered under us in a choir of regrets. Below, printing presses stood silent, hulking, old enough to remember when ink meant rebellion. Now what? Lena asked. We go analog, I said. Winter wanted silence. We'd give him paper cuts instead. The Riverside Print Co. smelled of ink, metal, and ghosts too stubborn to vacate. Lena brushed glass from her hair while I tested a rotary phone bolted to the wall. Dead. Winter's reach had grown fangs. We're boxed in, Lena said. Boxed is okay, I said. Boxes get mailed. I found the side office where foremen pretended to be literate. A mimeograph machine squatted in the corner, ancient, temperamental, but loud in all the right ways. Lena held up the recorder. "If we can't broadcast sound," she said, "we broadcast words." I unlatched the ledger, flipped to the clearest pages, and began feeding names and figures into the mimeograph's drum. The machine coughed purple ink like it had swallowed grief. The first copies slid out, ugly, uneven, magnificent, our manifesto. "Delivery method?" Lena asked. "Who likes news more than crooks?" I said. Crowds. Outside, a parade of factory workers flooded the street, end of shift, shoulders heavy with the city's overdue apologies. We tossed the sheets from the broken second-story window like confetti at a funeral. Men and women caught them, read, whispered, shouted. A fireman, still in soot, held one up to the sky as if asking for confirmation. Harbor City began to wake, and so did Winter's men. 3 sedans turned onto the block, forming a triangle no geometry teacher had ever blessed. They spilled out 6, maybe 8. Guns were drawn because discretion had died hours ago. We ran deeper into the print floor. Machines became barricades. The men entered behind us, their steps careful. Ink rollers offer no cover but plenty of places to disappear. One spoke. "Calder, you're trespassing on borrowed time." "Put it on my tab," I called back. Lena pointed to a heavy press arm above. We climbed the catwalk, breath sharp and short. Shots cracked below, metal sparked. A stray round struck the rail beside Lena's hand. We reached the roof again through a maintenance hatch. The skyline glittered like someone had thrown diamonds into the dark. Lena lifted the recorder, checked the battery. "We need a frequency Winter can't kill," she said. "There isn't one," I replied. "But there's a frequency he doesn't know about." Her eyes narrowed. "Station 13. Exactly. Station 13 wasn't legal, moral, or structurally sound, but it transmitted like divine intervention during Union strikes. If we could get there, the tape would sing for the whole city. Behind us, the hatch burst open. A shot sang past. Lena threw the recorder to me. "Run!" I grabbed her hand instead. Together. We disappeared over the roof's far side and into the Storm building over Harbor City. Station 13 lived below the Mariner Bridge, wedged between rusted girders and graffiti that deserved awards. The door was a steel panel pretending not to be there. I knocked twice, paused, knocked once. A pattern I'd learned during a labor dispute that still hadn't ended. The door opened to a kid barely 20, headphones swallowing half his skull. "You brought trouble," he said. "Trouble brings ratings," Lena said, pushing past. Inside, the room throbbed with low hum, the kind only illegal transmitters and bad wiring produce. The kid pointed us to the back booth. "Patch that in and keep it under 20 minutes. My breaker can't handle more." Lena connected the recorder to the terminal. The kid flipped switches, sliders, knobs. The machine warmed, a purr turning into a growl. Evelyn's voice filled my mind. "What you're about to hear may end careers," but then a new sound, distant like thunder learning profanity. "Did you hear?" Lena started. The walls shook. Dust rained from the ceiling. A muted boom rippled through the underbridge. The kid checked his board. Transmission stable. Whatever that was, it wasn't us. But I already knew. Harbor City Herald. Winter didn't just want to stop the story, he wanted to scorch the earth it grew from. Lena rewound the tape to the beginning. Her hands shook. "We have to move. He'll trace the feed." "He already has," I said, hearing engines in the distance. The kid looked from us to the console. "I'll stall them," he said. "Go." "Why help?" Lena asked. "Because lies are loud," he said. "Truth needs a subwoofer." We ran through the back exit, out into the bridge underbelly where rain started its soft percussion. Winter's sedan screeched into view on the main road above, engines snarling like things that hadn't eaten. Lena grabbed my coat. "What now?" "Now," I said, "we make the truth immortal." We cut through the drainage tunnel beneath the bridge, dirty, narrow, full of regrets too small to name. The sound of the explosion still echoed in my ribs. Winter had no more patience. The city had no more illusions. On the other side, we emerged onto a canal road littered with broken pallets and wet newspapers. Lena's eyes darted. "Calder," she pointed. One of the Herald's front pages flapped against a lamppost, still warm, edges singed. A single headline visible through soot. "Ledger confirmed. NAMES pending. Publication imminent." "They printed something before the blast," Lena whispered. "Then Winter failed," I said. "He can kill a building, not a story." Sirens wailed farther up the road, police, fire, ambulances, all calling for a city that suddenly wanted answers. "Come on," I said. "We're not done." Truth wasn't just out, it was multiplying, and Winter knew it. Harbor City's rain changed personality after an explosion. It fell harder, faster, like someone shaking a snow globe full of broken promises. Lena and I ducked into a grocery awning. My ribs complained. Her hands trembled around the recorder like it was a living thing. "We need a safe room," she said. "Somewhere Winter can't buy or burn." "Nothing's fireproof," I said, "but some rooms have witnesses." She knew the place before I said it. Greeley Print. The building was old brick and stubborn faith, owned on paper by a parish trust Winter manipulated like a bored puppeteer. But the pressmen weren't his. They belonged to ink. We reached the press floor soaked and panting. The owner, Gus Greeley, looked at us like we'd arrived with overdue rent. "You running from someone," he said, "or running toward something?" "Both," I said, holding up the recorder. "We need a truth that sticks." He nodded. "Press is warm. Make it quick." We set up between two Heidelberg presses that looked older than the mayor's excuses. Lena wiped water from the recorder ports. I fed the ledger's most damning pages into the plate maker. Numbers, dates, signatures, all about to become ink immigrants welcomed by the page. Then Gus flicked off the overhead lights. Footsteps. Not his. Winter's men entered the print shop with flashlights and discipline. Their beams swept across machines, catching motes like guilty stars. Lena whispered, "They tracked us." "No," I said. "They tracked the ledger." I pulled her behind a stack of bundled newsprint. 5 men moved methodically, trained, cold. One peeled off toward the plate maker, another toward the back office. They weren't here to question. They were here to erase. I scanned the room. Above, the catwalk connecting the loading bay to the binding station. A plan formed fast, stupid, better than dying under fluorescent lighting. "When they reach the press," I whispered, "we flood the room." "With what?" she asked. "Ink. They won't shoot blind." Her eyebrows said you're insane. Her mouth said fine. I waited until the lead man approached the plate maker. Then I sprinted to the pressure valve for the main ink line, pulled hard. The pipe screamed and burst. Black ink shot across the room like a ruptured artery. Men shouted. Flashlights died under the deluge. Guns barked but hit nothing. "Run!" I yelled. We sprinted up the stairs to the catwalk. Beneath us, chaos drowned under a river of publishing dye. Lena clutched the recorder. I clutched a hope I didn't trust. Gus waved us toward a rear exit. "Go!" he shouted. Outside, the rain swallowed us whole. Harbor City wasn't whispering anymore. It was yelling. Dawn bleeds slow over Harbor City, like the night doesn't want to let go of its excuses. The rain faded to mist as we reached the South Docks, a place where cargo and secrets arrive in equal quantities. Lena sagged against a bollard soaked through. "We can't run forever." "We don't have to," I said. The broadcast went through. The prince hit the street, winds on our side. She shook her head. "Winter won't quit, he'll twist the story." Heel footsteps behind us. I reached for my shoulder holster. "Relax," a familiar voice said. Evelyn Vale, hair damp, coat buttoned to defiance. "How?" Lena asked. "Walked," Evelyn said. "Reporters are harder to kill than roaches." The Herald rebuilt its server and posted the entire ledger 3 hours ago, minus your forged page. "You saw it?" I asked. "Looked real," she said. "Too real." "That's the point." She stepped close. Her voice softened. "Martin's turned himself in. He's naming names, confessing to anything adjacent, trying to outrun Winter with words." I'd seen that 100 times, guilt and desperation playing poker with self-preservation. "What about Winter?" Lena asked. Evelyn looked toward the water. "He's losing his men, some switched sides, some disappeared. He's wounded, dangerous because of it." A horn blared from the main road. We turned. A black sedan rolled in, familiar dents, familiar hunger. "Down!" I shouted. Bullets tore splinters from the dock rails. Evelyn dropped behind a crate. Lena ducked and slid the recorder into her coat. Winter emerged from the passenger side. Alone, calm, as if death owed him rent. "You too," he said, gesturing with an empty hand. "You broke the city." "No," I said. "We held up a mirror. You broke yourself." He smiled, a slow melting of ice. "The ledger isn't enough, Calder. People forget, but fear stays pristine." He drew a gun, not shaking, not wavering, then a new sound, sirens, not his. Police cruisers sealed the dock entrance. Officers spilled out, some beat cops, some brass. At the front, the deputy commissioner, a woman I'd only met twice but knew well enough not to lie to. "Hands up, Winter," she shouted. Winter laughed. "You can't cage me." But he hesitated, not because of the police. Because someone was standing behind him. Martin Vale, face bruised, coat torn, holding a revolver with both hands. "Drop it," Martin said. Winter turned just enough. A single shot cracked the dawn. Winter fell. Martin's gun shook in his grip. He wasn't going to stop," he stammered. Evelyn ran to him. They clung to each other, shaking like people trying to thaw. Police took statements. Bodies, evidence. The city exhaled. Harbor City had survived its longest night. For 2 weeks, Harbor City lived like a recovering patient. Slow movements, shallow breath, no sudden changes. Lena returned to the Blue Canary, singing for smaller crowds with bigger ears. Evelyn rebuilt WCRX's evening hour with sharper edges. Martin disappeared into legal limbo, balancing redemption on a scale no judge truly held. Me, I stayed in my office. The window still leaked when it rained. The radiator still clanked when it felt dramatic. But the city sounded different, less teeth, more tongue. On a cold Thursday evening, as the streetlights flickered awake, Lena climbed the fire escape and tapped on my window. "You got a minute?" she asked. "For you, a couple." She stepped in, shaking off the wind. "We did it," she said. "Winter's networks unraveling, rooks hiding out near the state line. The ledger's public, cleaned up, archived." "And the forged page?" I asked. "In the river," she said, "gave it the burial it deserved." She hesitated, rare for her. "You ever wonder what we are when the city doesn't need us?" "All the time," I said. "Then I remember the city always lies about not needing us." We shared a quiet minute. Harbor City hummed below, streetcars whining, horns arguing, the soft thud of a newspaper landing on a porch that used to fear headlines. Then the radio on my desk crackled. A familiar voice, Evelyn, calm and precise. "Tonight on WCRX we close a chapter. Harbor City has seen corruption exposed, networks dismantled, and justice, however imperfect, begin. This city owes thanks to those who refuse to go silent." Lena nudged me, smiling. "She means you." I doubted it. Evelyn meant everyone who'd chosen truth over convenience, but it felt nice to pretend. Then the tone of her voice shifted, gentle as a whisper. "And now a message from Station 13. Static washed the room, comfortable, warm. Then the voice of the kid from under the bridge. "To those who fought the dark, we're still broadcasting. A city that listens is a city worth saving." Lena closed her eyes. "He made it." "Truth travels," I said, "even without a license." She opened her eyes. "What now?" I leaned back, let the chair complain. "Now we wait for the next whisper. And if it doesn't come—" "It will," I said. "Cities don't heal, they hum through the pain." Rain began tapping the window, small, soft, persistent. The radio faded into slow jazz, the kind that forgives what words can't. Lena stood, touched my arm, and headed for the fire escape, her silhouette momentarily framed by neon from across the street. Before she climbed down, she said, "Good night, Calder. Try not to let the city keep you awake." I smiled. "It never sleeps. Why should I?" She vanished into the rain. My office settled back into its familiar quiet. Harbor City whispered again, and this time I whispered back.